Hot Cage Podcast is back on the air, back in your earlobes and your eye sockets. This is John Franklin with TJ Craig. TJ, how you doing this week?
I'm doing really well.
All right, man. It was a good week of fights. There's a lot to get to. Let's get rolling. We're gonna go ahead and jump right into the flurry and kind of go from there. Again, it's been kind of a big week. A lot happening lately, so there's a lot going on with the Strikeforce last card happening and those fighters moving over. It seems like Bellator is gaining some momentum. Obviously, the UFC is rolling right along. Dana White had surgery to fix his Meniere's disease, which he had surgery on his ear. So we'll let that ear recover before we shoot him a copy of our podcast, because we want two well-working, good sound ears to listen to this podcast. So we don't want to stress him out. All right, so, okay. First up, in the flurry, we're going to talk about Bellator 85. Like I said, Bellator's been gaining some traction. This was 85. They're doing a light heavyweight tournament this year. So running down the main card, we got Pat Curran defended his title, his featherweight title via split decision over Patricia Pitbull, who won the featherweight tournament to get that shot. Mikhail Zayats defeated Babalu Sobral by strikes in round one to advance in the light heavyweight tournament. Michael Chandler defended his lightweight title over Rick Hahn via RNC. And Jacob Noe defeated Seth Petrozelli by strikes in round one for to advance as well in the light heavyweight tournament. Okay, a couple things here. Let's talk about Bellator real quick. Obviously, I'm a UFC guy. Now that Strikeforce is gone, I think Bellator obviously is the number two promotion. They're gaining some traction. So my questions for you, first off, is do you think this light heavyweight tournament, which King Mo has not yet fought in, is kind of on its head here with Petrozelli and Sobral losing?
Yeah, that was kind of surprising that those two lost. So now it's kind of got turned upside down. So I mean, we'll see. I mean, the two fighters that won that are advancing are kind of young fighters. So I mean, they have a good and up and coming organization. But with Babalu losing, that was surprising. And Petrozelli, I didn't think he would lose at all. But and it's funny though, both of them lost in the first round. I mean, how surprising is that? They didn't even get out of the first round.
Yeah, the strikes no less. And when you look at Bellator, you got to kind of wonder, is Bellator happy that they lost? Because at the end of the day, if you're Bellator, you're not really going to make your promotion on the backs of Seth Petrozelli and Babalu Sobral. You're going to make your money on the backs of the guys that beat them, like the Michael Chandlers, like the Eddie Alvarez's. So it's good to have these kind of, would-be gatekeepers in the UFC that are kind of main card guys for you, but it's better that your guys take them out, right?
Right. Absolutely. I mean, now you can kind of, what better than having two young up-and-comers, carrying your organization. It's great for them.
And another thing that I was talking about to somebody about this recently, and really the interesting thing about the way they set up fights is you just have to have a name to kind of promote the fight. So it's like, well, why, if Michael Bisping were to win against Vitor Belfort, which we'll get to that in a second, he's not fighting the same Vitor Belfort, and does he really deserve a shot? And it's like, all you have to do is when people say, hey, Michael Bisping's fighting Anderson Silva, why is that? And it would beat Vitor Belfort, and then that's a name, so you're like, all right, shit, he beat Vitor Belfort. What can I say to that? So now it's like, with Bellator building up their guys, you can say, who's Mikhail Zayats? He beat Babalu. Okay, well, fuck. All right, he beat Babalu. So, okay, perfect example. Michael Chandler's now the guy that beat Eddie Alvarez. So, if Eddie Alvarez goes on to great things in the UFC, if he ever makes it there with goddamn litigation, but if he goes on to great things in the UFC, Michael Chandler will always be the guy that beat him.
Right.
All right, so the other fights, speaking of that, was Michael Chandler defeating Rick Hahn. So just give me really, again, an abstract kind of view of Bellator right now for you. Like I said, obviously they're the second promotion because of the dissolution of Strikeforce. So what do you think the future holds for them? Is it bright? It seems like they're getting bigger sponsors and they seem to be more relevant, right?
Right. Well, one, they picked up, they're on Spike TV, the fallout of UFC on Spike, and then Spike comes and picks up Bellator. So that gives them some good publicity there. I think the organization is great and up and coming. It's bringing in some fighters. The fighters are looking really good. Chandler, beat Alvarez, and now Chandler defeats Rick in the second round, I believe, with a choke. And I mean, he's looking great. So I mean, you have some up and coming fighters that really are establishing themselves in Bellator. You know, and if I'm an organization, what better way to UFC are just doing great things, but if you can kind of ride their coattails and bring up these guys, uh, it's gonna make you even look better.
All right, just one last point, and I want to move on. But is Bellator's main competition, and you can kind of see that a little bit with the marketing now. I don't think Bellator's going against UFC because that's David and Goliath. They know they can't beat the UFC. But really, is their main competition not the Ultimate Fighter? Like, they need to be producing better young talent than the Ultimate Fighter, correct?
Yeah, I would agree with that. It's more or less the Ultimate Fighter is their competition, but I think Bellator at first tried to make UFC their competition, kind of like this thing with Alvarez. They don't want to cut him loose; they want to keep him. We're having contract disputes, and you're right. It's David versus Goliath. I mean, I think they're taking the wrong stand. Instead of trying to match up against them, I think they need to align themselves in a sort of way. Maybe not, UFC and Bellator, but kind of align themselves up to kind of follow the path that the UFC is doing.
Yeah, I agree. And whatever you think the importance of Spike TV is, not you, but the general public, Spike seems to think they had a huge influence on UFC and their growth, and UFC doesn't think so much. So whatever. No one's ever going to agree on that. But
Right.
we'll see what they do for Bellator. Okay, moving on to another who was the number 2 promotion, no longer. Obviously, they've dissolved. We're going to get onto the Strikeforce list. So this week, USA Today reported that the Strikeforce list is out. I'm going to go ahead and read you the Strikeforce list, and I want you to tell me, did they pick the right guys to bring over? Did they miss anybody? Did anybody, kind of get fortunate? Okay, so going down the divisions, first up in heavyweight, the lone guy was Daniel Cormier. There's been some rumors about Josh Barnett, but for now it's only Cormier. Light heavyweight is Gegard Mousasi and Gian Vellante. Middleweights, Hodger Gracie, Tim Kennedy, Lorenz Larkin, Luke Rockhold, and Ronaldo Souza. Welterweights, Roger Bowling, Jason High, Nate Marquardt, Tarek Safadine, and Bobby Veckler. Lightweight is Ryan Couture, obviously Randy Couture's son, Pat Healy, Kurt Hollabaugh, Adriano Martins, Gilbert Melendez, KJ Nunes, and Josh Thompson. So a few of these guys already have fights. We'll get to one that's been recently announced here up next in the flurry. But what do you think about that list? Is anybody missing from it?
Not really. I don't think anybody's really missing from it. I think it's a great list. I think bringing over that talent, especially in the middleweight division, where there was a few Bisping, you have some other fighters that are kind of lining up, but now you just made that middleweight division a lot more interesting. So I think that's great. A couple other fighters came over. It's just powering up the UFC. And I said this in the Sunday Morning Corner, man. Now they're doing great cards, but this makes them do a whole lot better because now you have more fighters. You're going to have a lot more fights you can schedule, and it's just going to make UFC's cards even get better.
Yeah, I agree. And obviously what it's going to do is it's going to change what the floor is of the UFC. Obviously the ceiling's always going to stay the same. The best fighters are going to be there, but the floor, the three fights in your out or 3 losses in your out rule might go to 2 losses now that they're more stacked.
Right.
Because, my question is, do you think that the middleweight division becomes any more marketable in terms of fights? Because the issue with the middleweight division right now is Anderson Silva doesn't want to fight Bisping, and we'll get to why he won't be fighting Bisping here in a sec, and he doesn't want to fight Chris Weidman because they're not big names. So he wants to fight guys now. Obviously, do you think it's a more marketable fight for him to fight Jacare? And I don't know what the kind of relationship is there. Luke Rockhold, who's the champ, Tim Kennedy, or Hodger Gracie's there, and no matter what you want to say about him as a fighter, I mean, he is 6-1. He's a Gracie, so you can put your fight poster that says Silva versus Gracie.
Right.
So do you think the Strikeforce fighters that are coming in are more marketable than the existing middleweights? Yes or no?
A couple of them, I will have to say. Like you said, Gracie. Well, first let's start off Rockhold. Rockhold's the champ. He's 9-0. He's 10-1 in MMA. There's a fight off the bat you could market. Gracie, and then even Ronaldo I mean, that's another one I'd like to see. So yeah, I mean, that division becomes much more marketable, and it gives Anderson Silva people that he needs to walk through. And you like how I said that? He needs to walk through. I mean, I don't know any one of them that can really put up a fight because I don't think there's anybody in the middle of the division that can do that. But I mean, it's going to be a fight, and any given day.
Yeah, it's true. And the thing about these Strikeforce guys that I'll admit is it's not a Strikeforce thing necessarily, but Luke Rockhold, Tim Kennedy, Jocko Ray, I can't imagine those guys not going after Anderson. You know what I mean? They're cocky enough, and they're gonna headhunt too. So of the guys that are coming over right now, I believe either Ryan Couture or Pat Healy has a fight. I think they're trying to find a fight for Pat Healy. Ryan Couture might have one. Melendez has a fight already. And it's all but done between Cormier and Frank Mir. So he's going to fight Frank Mir at heavyweight, you would think, and then he wants to go after John Jones 205, obviously because his good buddy and teammate Cain Velasquez is heavyweight champ. I'll ask you one more question on this Strikeforce list, and then we'll move on to the next subject, which kind of involves the Strikeforce list. What do you think is going to ultimately end up being bigger for the UFC? The absolution or the dissolution of WEC, dissolution of Strikeforce?
Oh, that's a good question. I would have to say it's measured about the same, right? Because you brought over some good fighters. You started a new division with WEC coming over, and you brought some great fighters. I mean, the Cowboy Cerrone. I mean, you had Diaz.
The entire lightweight division.
Yeah, the entire lightweight division. But I mean, you have some great fighters coming over from Strikeforce, so it's it's almost on a comparable level. As you got the bigger guys coming from Strikeforce, the little guys coming from WEC. I would have to say right off the bat, it's probably going to be Strikeforce, only because we don't know those lightweight divisions, and it's really not marketable, and they haven't done pay-per-views. But you could actually take a couple of Strikeforce fighters right now, and they could headline a pay-per-view.
That's true. Okay, so moving on. Next up in the flurry, kind of staying in line with the Strikeforce list, the segues are just falling like rain tonight. So the next thing I want to talk about is a fight that is scheduled. It's going to be UFC on FX, I think, 7. It's going to be in Stockholm, Sweden. It's going to be Alexander Gustaffson versus Gegard Mousasi. So the thing that I will give Gustaffson is he's pretty much earned a title shot, but he doesn't want to, sit back and rest on his laurels. He wants to stay active, and he's going to fight Gegard Mousasi despite his name being spelled incorrectly by me. So what do you think about that fight? Pretty exciting, huh?
Oh, yeah. I texted as soon as I heard about it when it broke. I texted you immediately and said, this is a great fight. I love the fight. I think it's going to be an exciting fight. Listen, we together have been watching Mousasi fight for a long time. And I think him coming over to the UFC is as exciting as this might be one of the most exciting guys to me personally come over to UFC in a while, and put him up against Gustafson right away. Like you said, he's earned a title shot, but he doesn't want to sit back and wait. So put him against Mousasi. Now we get to see what Mousasi is really made of.
Well, yeah, and the only thing that worries you is the question is what Gegard Mousasi is going to show up. I mean, he tends to get lazy sometimes in fights. He's unchallenged. The only thing I love about this fight, well, I love a lot of things about this fight, but the thing I love the most about it is that if Mousasi goes in there screwing around, Gustafson's going to just take him out. I mean, he's not one of these Strikeforce guys that, all respect due to them, but, Gustafson's going in there to take guys out, establish himself as one of the best fighters in the game, and kind of, kind of show that he deserves John Jones. Even though he's already kind of got him, he needs to show that, I'm the guy that's coming in here taking guys out. So if Mousasi goes in there screwing around, he's going to be on his ass wondering what, thinking is he's still in Strikeforce, because Gustaffson will fuck around and knock him right back into Strikeforce if he's not careful. So yeah. What are your thoughts on that fight? Do you think we're going to see now Mousasi look great against Mike Kyle, but Mike Kyle ain't Gustafson?
Yeah, I think coming over to the UFC, I think we're probably gonna see the best Mousasi we've seen in a while. I mean, he's a well-rounded fighter. He has ground game. He has stand-up. I mean, we've seen him in Strikeforce, we've seen him in Dream, uh, fought some K1 or M1. I'm sorry, and the guy has extreme talent, but you're right, he's kind of lazy, so we don't know who's gonna show up. But I think moving over to UFC, I think we're gonna see the Mousasi that we know and expect.
I agree. I sure hope so because like I said, these guys sometimes in Strikeforce, I don't know if it was they just. I mean, you get into the UFC, it's like you're on Broadway. I mean, it's the big, UFC is Broadway, and Strikeforce is kind of off Broadway. So do you get up the same for both? Because there's been some guys traditionally, King Mo, Rockhold, Jacare. They've taken it easy in fights, and you can't. I mean, listen. The one thing you can say about the UFC is those guys are in there to take people out. They're not screwing around. So if
I
you're
mean,
them, either
yeah,
go ahead.
yeah, and I mean, we have to look back. If you look at Musasi's record and who he's fought, I mean, he's taken out some pretty good people. Uh, I mean, Ronaldo's up. He's beat him. He's beat Babalu. He's beat Dennis Kane back in the day. I mean, it was he has a great uh, record, and he fights people, and it's this is the thing about him. I think I think when he underestimates or thinks he can beat somebody pretty easily, that's when he gets lazy. But when he's lined up with somebody that he knows might test him, we see a great come out in him.
That's true, and I mean honestly, that happens all the time in sports. You'll see a football team that plays up to their competition. That's what Mousasi
Right.
does. Right? He's just one of those guys that fights to the level of his competition. All right, so moving on, we're going to get to what really is the headline for the last week or so. UFC on FX7, Belfort versus Bisping. Title shot for at least Michael Bisping on the line at middleweight. And I'm going to go ahead and run down the main card, some notable fights maybe on the undercard. So first off, the main event, Vitor Belfort against Michael Bisping. He defeated Michael Bisping with strikes in round 2. The head kick started it, and the ground and pound finished it. CB Dollaway had actually a hell of a fight with Daniel Serafian. He won by split decision, 29-28, 28-29, 29-28. Gabriel Gonzaga defeated Ben Rothwell by a guillotine choke, which was really and we'll go down the card in a second. It really was a substandard guillotine choke, and we'll talk about it here in a sec. But yeah, so Gonzaga defeated Rothwell. Khabib Nurmagomedov defeated Thiago Tavares by strikes in round 1. This was a very controversial fight. Even Dana White tweeted about it, so we'll get to that as well. On the undercard, Nick Lentz defeated Diego Nunez by a unanimous decision. Edson Barbosa took Lucas Martins apart, and that was pretty much it. Ronnie Marks won a decision. That's all that really sticks out to me. So let's go ahead and break these fights down individually, and I'll get your thoughts on them. First up, Vitor Belfort against Michael Bisping. Your thoughts?
My thoughts on that fight. Listen, I'm going to reference back to the Sunday morning quarterman again. That has to be the best looking 35-year-old I've ever seen. And I kind of said something, with a TRT, but that argument's, for another day. But I was not expecting the beef Vitor Belfort that I saw last night in the ring. I did not expect that at all. He came in, he was relaxed, he had a game plan. He didn't charge in. He laid back a little bit, was countering. I mean, he was really finding his, breaking the fight down as he was going along. Michael Bisping, he's a great fighter. He came in there. He was looking to win. He was pushing the fight, and he got caught. I mean, but man, Vitor, I can't get over how he looked last night. I mean, it astonishes me almost because I knew he still had that much fight in him, but last night he looked really good.
I agree, and I've said it once, and I'll say it 1,000 times. Vitor Belfort only loses to Hall of Famers. That's it. He beats everyone that he's supposed to beat, or you would think he's supposed to beat. He's about the easiest money you're ever going to make in Vegas. So over his career, he's lost to John Jones, Anderson Silva, Dan Henderson, Alistair Overeem, Tito Ortiz, Randy Couture, Chuck Liddell, Sakuraba, and Randy Couture, Randy Couture a couple times. So who of those guys isn't a Hall of Famer? I mean, not even a question. Maybe Overeem? Maybe.
No, he'll be in the Hall of Fame because of the stuff he's done in K1.
Yeah. So I mean, he's only ever lost to studs, and there's only a handful of guys in the world that you can say that about. Shogun's another one. I think Shogun's only ever lost to studs. So when he gets in there and he's supposed to beat somebody, that's what makes me believe in Gustaffson is that he beat Shogun, because you beat Shogun, man, you're destined for things. So
Right.
Anyway, back to Vitor. Like you talked about earlier, you wrote the Sunday Morning Corner, man. You spoke about how Vitor looked good, some problems that Bisping had. So go ahead and let me put you in Michael Bisping's corner. Is it as simple as keep your right hand up and don't get kicked in the head, or is there more to his strategy for him?
That was more strategy. I think he wasn't really expecting. I think it threw him off his game last night because you can see towards the end of the first round, he kind of felt. You could tell he was feeling a little uncomfortable. I mean, Bisping always shows up for a fight. He's always in shape. He always trains hard. He has great cardio, and I think he really expected Vitor to come out and charge him and try to work the takedowns or even work the punches, and he was going to counter himself. I think he got a little confused. He got a little lax. He didn't know really what was going on. He dropped his hands, but I mean, it was nothing. It wasn't like keep your hand up, keep your hand up, keep your hand up, man. He was just Vitor was working those counters and those combos, and he would throw those kicks and just got caught. I mean, that's literally what happened. He got caught.
Yeah, and with respect to Michael Bisping, you got to give him props because afterwards he was the humblest guy in the ring. He said, "Listen, I got caught. He was the better man tonight. No excuses." So he said I had great training camp and all that. Now, what I've heard, and I want to get your take on this in terms of the Sunday Morning Corner man aspect of things, is that he should have grappled with Vitor a little bit more. Maybe got him against the cage. What are your thoughts on that? I think Michael Bisping would really be a great dirty boxer, don't you?
Yeah, I think so too. And I mean, against Brian Stann, we really saw his takedown and his ground and pound game, his wrestling skills. So he probably should, when he was getting countered or something, he maybe should have took it just against the cage, throw some dirty boxing in there, try a couple takedowns just to see, throw him off guard. When you stand in the middle of the ring with Vitor and you're just trying to walk up on him and throw some punches, 90% of the people are going to get caught. And guess what? He fell into that 90% last night.
Yeah, and the thing is, when you face Vitor Belfort, you realize that there's world-class strikers and then there's other guys. And Vitor hits you in a way that you're like, wait a second, this guy, he hits you to finish you.
Right.
Some guys get in there, they screw around. Chael Sonnen, for everything he is, he's not a knock you out kind of striker. And I think that Michael Bisping got a nice little lesson in what would have happened if he fought Anderson Silva. Now, okay, let's move forward with Michael Bisping. Is it 3 strikes and you're out with number 1 contender shots here? He lost to Dan Henderson in dramatic fashion. Got the bomb dropped on him, and then he lost to Chael Sonnen. Both would have given him a shot at Anderson Silva, and now he's lost to Vitor Belfort. So what's next for Michael Bisping? I mean, you said in Sunday Morning Corner, man, it looks like he'll be keeping Gates, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's where I'm going to have to go with that. He's going to have to start down low, but I'm afraid he's going to become that gatekeeper when somebody else needs to make a charge up the ladder. Guess who they're going to be fighting? Michael Bisping. And he's a great opponent, but he just cannot get over the number 1 contendership hump. I mean, it's big. That's no hump. That's a fucking mountain to him, and he can't climb it. And I feel bad for the guy. Starting off, I really didn't like him. He ran his mouth a lot, but lately, this last couple fights, and even watching interviews, he's really become a humble person. He loves to fight. He loves the fight game. He loves to amp up the fights. And he's just been great for the sport, especially in the UK. So I feel bad that he's not getting that title shot. But how can you give it to him when he loses to people like that? I mean, 2 of those contenderships was a fucking knockout. One was a decision that could have gone either way. But 2 knockouts to get to the title shot, can't do it.
Yeah, and again, it's when he faced Hall of Famers, and Chael Sonnen. Say what you want to about Chael Sonnen. I mean, if not for Chael Sonnen's mouth, I would like to evaluate him as a fighter. As a matter of fact, I'd like to take some time on the podcast in the future, just evaluate Chael as a fighter, take everything he's ever said off the table, look at the numbers, maybe get somebody on, maybe Fightnomics or something like that, and just let's evaluate Chael just as a fighter, because obviously Vitor's a Hall of Famer and obviously Henderson's a Hall of Famer, and they both dropped a bomb on the kid. So I think that Bisping, I think Bisping has a bright future. Not to put him out to pasture yet, but I think that he's going to be huge when the UFC, which we both believe, starts branching off into UFC Brazil, UFC this, UFC that. He may be the president of the UFC UK one day. I think he's really setting himself up for that. The way he carries himself, kind of how he handles things. I think that's his next step. But in terms of fighting, yeah, he's probably going to be keeping Gates. So now that Vitor Belfort, he used his time in the post-fight interview to call out Chael Sonnen initially. Well, to not even call out Chael Sonnen, to insult Chael Sonnen, and then call out pretty much John Jones. So if you're Vitor, why would you use this perfect opportunity to kind of springboard yourself into a rematch with Anderson Silva to call out John Jones? My question is, does that tell us that Anderson Silva is the best fighter in the world because Vitor Belfort wants nothing to do with him?
Well, I don't know, man.
He's fought them both.
Yeah, it got cleaned. Anderson cleaned him out, but again, I said this earlier, and Vitor might be. Last night he positioned himself better than any fighter in the UFC, and I'll tell you, because in 185 class and the 205 class, he can fight in both of those, and guess what? He's right up there to take a title shot on either one of them, or maybe hell on both of them if he plays his cards right. If he could win, he was a broken elbow away from winning the light heavyweight fight. Anderson Silva, that lasted about 75 seconds, I think, and
yeah,
he was out. So
well, let's not get it twisted about the Jones fight real quick. That's the reason why Vitor Belfort is a 205-pound champion right now is John Jones's pride. That's it, because he should have tapped. So
yeah,
go ahead, continue.
So I really think he thinks he can beat John Jones. Yes. More than he can beat Anderson Silva. Or maybe he wants that fight back because maybe he held back on the armbar and didn't want to break it. We don't know what he was thinking. And but he got destroyed after that. So it's what more way to promote yourself than call out John Jones? Maybe he thinks he's the best fighter in the world and he wants another chance at him. I don't know.
Yeah, it's true. And I don't know, I think that you reach a certain point where you kind of like to see these guys as they get up in age fighting other guys that get up in age. I like the fact that Henderson fought Shogun, and they both weren't what they once were, and kind of a little slower, and made it for a hell of a fight. When they were in their 20s, one of them would have clipped the other, and that's the end of the night. But in their 30s, the mid-30s, they're not the same guy. So should maybe Belfort fight a Tim Kennedy or a Roger Gracie? These guys coming over. Should he fight, a Brandon Vera? Should he? There's a lot of interesting fights out there for him at either 185 or 205 pounds. I just don't know why I understand why he wants to fight the champs. I don't know why they would want to keep putting him in there. Yeah. He's a hell of a guy. He's been in the UFC forever. He's about as much part of the UFC, despite the the big gap in his career with the UFC. He's the UFC. He was destroying folks, way back when. So I just think there's some more interesting fights out there for him. Yeah. I like the Rich Franklin fight. He took him out. So I don't know. Maybe they think that if you put him in there with on the quote-unquote senior circuit, he's just going to take those guys out. So I don't know. All right, next up, we got Gabriel Gonzaga. Kind of, I don't want to say welcome back, but he's been out of the company over the last couple of years. He has the never will be forgotten head kick over Crow Cop from way back when. He defeated Ben Rothwell with really a lazy guillotine. And Ben Rothwell got destroyed by Chael Sonnen on the post-fight. Chael said, it's not that great of a guillotine, but when you put it on a guy that's looking for a way out, it's good enough. So, what are your thoughts on those two guys in that fight?
I don't. The first round, it was closer on paper than it really looked in the ring. I think Gonzaga destroyed him, honestly. I think Rothwell didn't show up. I don't know what was going on with him. I didn't know if he tasted some power and was like, I don't like this, or what the hell happened. But overall, Gonzaga just stepped up his game. He kind of brought it and took him out. There's not much else to say about it.
Yeah, and there's not really much of a future for these guys. Once upon a time, Gabriel Gonzaga was probably the third-ranked heavyweight in the UFC. Ahead of Junior Dos Santos and guys like that. He was really on the rise after he knocked out Crow Cop. And, now there's not much of a future for these guys. They could go on a run. they're just a couple of guys to kind of, fight the Todd Duffys of the world to see where they stand. And I don't know, right? There's not much left for these two in the division. It's just match them up with a similar guy and hope for a hell of a fight, right? Pat Barry type.
Yeah,
put Pat Barry in there with one of them. Check Congo, right?
Yeah, I mean, that's pretty much it. I mean, especially after showing Rothwell, I don't know what they're going to do with him. Maybe something happened. Maybe something will come out this week. Was he injured? He did drop some weight, and I thought he was going to be a quicker, more dominant striker coming into the ring last night, and it didn't look like that at all. So he dropped that weight. I think he dropped like 25 pounds, muscled up a little bit, but it didn't show at all. That's what was surprising to me.
Yeah, and well, another thing Chael Sonnen said in the post-fight is he said that he was weird. He said that Ben Rothwell's a friend, but he was saying that like Ben Rothwell switched training camps or something, and he said something like, when a guy switches training camps, it's because his old training camp wants nothing to do with him anymore, or some crazy shit like that. And it was just weird that he was just like blasting him, and he goes, Ben Rothwell, he's a friend, and I was like, Jesus, is he a friend? Because Christ, you're fucking working this guy. So I don't know. I don't know if maybe Chael and him had a falling out, and that Chael kind of knew something. I have no idea. Again, it was an okay fight. If it were me, I'd put Gonzaga in there with Pat Barry or something like that. One of those kind of guys. It might make for a hell of a night. So beyond that, I can't really see much to it.
Right.
All right. So next, Khabib Nurmagomedov defeated Thiago Tavares with about 47 elbows. Dana White tweeted immediately. He dropped about as many elbows on Dan Miragliotta's reffing as Khabib dropped on Tavares' face. So, is that the story of this fight? Is it Khabib and him looking good, or is it Miragliotta just standing there watching Tavares get blasted with elbows and not doing shit about it?
Like, how many elbows did he drop? It was in the 20s, I think. Might have been.
I think it was 20 total, but it was like 10.
50? It looked like fucking 50. That's what it looked like.
Well, they were saying it was 10 more than it needed to be. So
yeah, I mean, I was trying to throw in the fucking towel from my couch, and it wasn't working. So I mean, listen, Khabib looked good. I mean, you coming against Tavares, and he even said, that Tavares was one of the better fighters to come out of Brazil. But damn, man, he looked really good last night. He brought his A game. He came in. He didn't seem like the crowd really affected him. He was in a hostile environment, and he just had a game plan and he stuck to it, caught him, and then dropped some elbows that fucking I felt this morning.
Yeah, and it's funny that Khabib looks good, and of all the divisions to look good in, it's 155, which is goddamn loaded. So it's like, for him, he's 5'10", 145, 170, probably don't make sense for him. He's a young guy. He's 24. So, I mean, do you think he's just this guy that's going to go on destroying people for the next couple of years, and then, he's a couple of years away, right? Or is he closer than we think? I mean, he took out Tavares. He decisioned Gleison Tibau, and he beat Kamal Shalras, submitted him. So those are his last three fights. So, I mean, the kid's 19-0. Chael Sonnen was slobbering all over the guy, saying anytime you go 19-0, it's impressive. He's got 3 in the UFC. They're all fairly impressive. What's next?
I mean, you got to start moving him up the ladder. Yeah, he's young, but he's dominating young. I mean, he's said it all last night with that fight when he took him out on the ground. And listen, you just move him up the ladder. I think you kind of do it slow. He's probably about a year away. He can pick up some more attributes to his game, and then you give him the shot.
Well, unfortunately, they moved Clay Guida to 145 because he was he's what I used to call MMA's Winky Wright. Every time somebody thought they were going to go on a nice little run, Winky Wright went in there and just kind of had that shitty style that just made you look bad, and he would jab you, and he just put the brakes to your whole career, Winky Wright. If he didn't beat you, he just made you look horrible. And Clay Guida the same thing. Clay Guida got Anthony Pettis' ass a couple years ago, man, and Pettis came in, running hot, and then Guida just said,
"No, you're not."
Yeah, let's slow it down for a second with this hype train, because he was he was biding time for his title shot, for Christ's sakes.
Yeah.
And Guido went in there and switched that up, so he's gone. So, I mean, I don't know. You don't want to, you think in your head, you become a prisoner of the moment. Who should he fight? I don't know. Does a guy like Jamie Varner make sense? I mean, Barboza's at 155. You put those two guys together. We'll get to Barboza's victory next. I mean, is there anything you can see on the horizon for him?
I mean, you can match him up pretty much with anybody in the 155 the way he looked last night, and I think he would perform great. So, yeah, I mean, the thing about 155, it's so damn stacked. It's like you can match anybody in the next fight they have a fucking title fight. They're all that good. I mean, I think we discussed this in the last podcast. You can go down 10, the top 10 fighters, and they could be champions. Hell, you could probably go down to the top 12 and it still be good matchups.
That's true. And listen, just for the record, I want to go ahead and just make this official because this is one of the greater calls I've ever made in terms of Guida as Winky Wright. Just this is a quick diversion. All right, so Mac Danzig derailed you, buddy. He beat Danzig. Nate Diaz derailed you. Okay? Rafael Dos Anjos derailed you. Takanori Gomi derailed you. Anthony Pettis derailed you. And he's lost to some other guys, obviously, Huerta beat him, but I mean, that's a pretty good list of guys that were contenders who Clay Guida went ahead and just, they might as well call his ass the Dream Crusher because he's taking some guys' careers. And remember in the cartoons when you'd switch that way and the train tracks would put you on a different direction? That's Clay Guida, man. He's standing there just flipping the tracks on you. All right, so another 155er. Let's get to him, and then we'll close out. We'll do our finish strong. Edson Barboza, he's back on it. Defeated Luke Martins pretty soundly. I mean, again, in the post-fight, Sonnen was saying that, that Edson Barboza's not the guy to go in there screwing around with. And actually, I think it was Dominic Cruz, who just didn't feel like Martins went in there with a solid game plan. So
he tapped out on strikes. He tapped out. I mean, I can still hear him tap out from. He might be on the plane or at his house, and he's still tapping out. He had fucking nightmares when he woke up after that. I mean,
listen, Barboza. I mean, he got caught by Jamie Varner very famously, but it's pretty crazy. Barboza's talent, right? I mean, he ran into a former champ in Varner, and he took him lightly. But I mean, the way that dude was dropping, it's very rare you see a guy drop hammer fists from up here. He was whipping hammer fists onto Martin's head.
Yeah.
I mean, listen, you tap from strikes, you get the rap of being a pussy or whatever. But I mean, this dude was Indiana Jones whipping hammer fists on this dude. And I mean,
he came in on a mission.
That's got to be respected, right?
Barboza was on a mission last night, man, and you could tell because he was throwing some shit. Like he was throwing leg kicks, and you could tell in his face that he wanted to fucking chop that leg in half. Like he wanted to take the leg out. Like his facial expression was like, "I'm gonna fucking hurt you bad," and that's what he did. He came in on a mission. Both of them came out. Both of them came out and looked pretty good for the first minute or so. I thought it was going to be a good fight, and then, Jesus, man, Barboza has the talent in that guy. He could be really something if he just stays focused. Don't never take anybody lightly again. Keep what you're doing, and we're definitely going to see you fighting for the title.
Well, you know what? The thing is weird about Barboza is that you forget his last fight was the loss to Jamie Varner.
Yeah.
And it was in May of last year, but why it's confusing to everyone is because we're watching all this end-of-year stuff, and we're seeing that roundhouse that he clocked Terry Edom with, and you're thinking, shit, this guy's a world beater, and he really is, but I mean, you forget that he got derailed by Jamie Varner, and now that's in his head. He's like, my last fight wasn't, spinning back, kicking Terry Edom. It was getting my forehead crushed by Jamie Varner, so that's what he's going to the ring with. So, hell yeah, he's ripping those leg kicks, through Mark. I mean, you hate to be the guy, after that on the first fight back. And Lucas Martins was just the guy that was on, I'm using goddamn train analogies tonight like a maniac, but he was the guy wrong on the tracks, man, and Barboza came through. Yeah. So, I don't know, man. Next up for Barbosa, what do you think? I mean, Varner won his last fight, so Barbosa shouldn't get another shot at him, right?
You can throw that
I
rematch.
don't
I'd
know,
watch
man.
it.
Do you like the Khabib fight?
Oh, that'd be a good fight. Why not throw those two bastards in the ring? Those dudes will try to take each other's heads off.
Yeah, I mean, I think they both mean business, and I kind of like when the guys fight when they're young, because then if they both stay in the hunt, someday we might see them in a title fight, you know. So I like that. All right, so next we're gonna get up to our finish strong. I'll go ahead and go first because I got something that's bugging the hell out of me, and we'll give you a second to get yours. Get your wits about you. All right, my finish strong is on this whole business about stepping up and, fighters kind of, it's their job to step up and all the hell that John Jones caught for quote-unquote canceling 151 and this, that, and the other. And what really made me think about it was Josh Barnett. So Josh Barnett fought in the last Strikeforce, and he said, I had a horrible training camp. I've been feeling like shit. And they said, well, I had a flu. And the guy's like, when'd you get over the flu? And he's like, I'm getting over it right now in this interview and all this crazy shit. And they said, well, why'd you fight? He goes, because that's what I do. I come in here. My job is to take people out. I'm a killer, and that's what I'm meant to do. I'm a mercenary. Just all this shit that he was saying about how dutiful it is that he step in the ring and deliver for the fans and for himself, and that's what he does. Then I saw the salaries released. Josh Barnett made $250,000 for the final Strikeforce card, which is probably why they're going out of business. But if you're going to sit there and tell me that the reason why you're stepping up even though you feel horrible and you had a horrible training camp and, he said stuff like I should still be tough enough to take this guy out and blah, 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 blah. Don't let me see that you made $250,000 for a fight that you would not have made if you didn't fight. Because I'm sure a huge incentive for you fighting in that fight was $250,000. Not so much your goddamn warrior spirit. And I'm sure you have all those things. Okay? And I don't doubt that, his nickname's the War Master, and I believe it all. Josh Barnett's been fighting forever. Which is part of the reason why I think Josh Barnett's never going to be in the UFC is this right here. He got paid $250,000 to fight in Strikeforce. He's not worth $250,000 in fighting terms. He's certainly not worth it to the UFC. So he's going to continue to fight in promotions that need him bad enough to pay him $250,000 to fight. So for me, I've never been a fan of this step-up stuff anyway, because if a guy's hurt, he fights like shit, and then he says it, everyone's like, oh, excuses. I was like, listen, my fucking ACL was shot, and you want me to fight, I either step up or I get shit for not stepping up, and then my ACL, I get my ass whipped. And, like Cain Velasquez. He fought in the first Fox fight, got destroyed by Velasquez, and, got destroyed by Dos Santos, and then he said he was hurt, and everybody's like, oh, yeah, you were hurt, And it's like, what? You can't win. So, for me, I think that, fight when you're healthy. Okay, I don't need you to step up. Now with these Strikeforce guys, UFC's stacked. They're getting smarter. They're putting guys on the cards that can step in for you. Just fight when you're healthy. Okay, this doesn't need to be this, this machismo, how big your dick and balls are because you fought. Like, just fight when you're healthy. Go in there when you're going to put your best effort forth, and let's just move on. All right? All right, it's on you. Finish strong.
That was a pretty good one, by the way. My finish strong is going to be with the Strikeforce closing down and UFC bringing the fighters over. I think it's a great alignment for the UFC. I think it really plays into the decision of promoting different countries and having UFCs in those countries and bringing up fighters through their own nation. And it's probably the smartest thing I've seen. We're going to see UFC Brazil, Australia, China. I mean, it's going to be outstanding. And now they have lined themselves with some major fighters coming in where they can put the cards together for a long time to come as they're building up their name, their brand. And I think it's genius. I think we're going to see some great fights. I'm excited about the fights coming up. I think we're going to see some great cards, and I think it's a smart move. And I'm pumped. I'm pumped to see the next probably 6 to 8 months of the UFC because there's going to be some great cards, deep cards. That's what we like, and we're just going to see UFC explode.
Yeah, and they really are, just to kind of, before we hang it up here, just to kind of piggyback a little bit on what you said, they really have the perfect business model. And boxing, I mean, if it's not dead, man, it's in the ICU for sure. And I think that what they're able to do with getting more depth in their ranks is they're able to now give us so much free content. It's ridiculous, and no other sport can really beat that. They've kind of taken the best of boxing and honestly the best of the WWE, and they're really putting together a hell of a business model here because, you get a lot of free content. I mean, you and I have been watching this for a long time. And there was a time when in 12 months you bought 12 pay-per-views. And that's not the case anymore. You may still buy a lot of pay-per-views, but you're getting a lot of free fights too. I mean, Belfort, Bisping, that's pay-per-view quality right there. All these UFC, and I, as a fan, I personally am thankful that they are really super stoked about their Fox deal because they're going to give us a lot. They're loading these Fox cards. There's another one coming up. So just to kind of give you a preview, the next Hot Cage podcast will be previewing the next upcoming UFC on Fox card, which will be January 26th from Chicago. The card is stacked. Demetrius Johnson versus John Dodson for the flyweight title. Quentin Jackson fighting Glover Teixeira in what may be his last fight in the UFC. He's got some issues. The UFC won't let him wear Reebok in the ring because they're sponsored by Nike. So, what have you. It's probably going to be Rampage's last fight. He says he's willing to fight for less in an organization that cares more about their fighters. Donald Cerrone's fighting Anthony Pettis in probably one of the most highly anticipated fights of the year. Eric Koch is fighting Ricardo Lamas. Blake Guida's on the undercard. Ryan Bader's on the undercard. Big surprise there. Fighting Machyshenko.
Janitor.
Yeah, dude, when you fight Machyshenko, you're either on your way up or you're on your way out. So Bader better take this guy out because Machyshenko he's not even a gatekeeper, dude. He's the keeper of the entrance. Like if you're either coming in or going out when you meet Machyshenko. And he's got the perfect name, the janitor. Because if you lose to him, he's fucking sweeping your ass right up and put you in the garbage. So, all right. Great podcast as always. Keep looking out for the content. In the coming weeks, we're going to bring you more Sunday Morning Cornerman. You can follow that on Twitter soon enough. We're bringing you more content. We're looking for kind of where we're going to end up on which one of these websites. We're free agents now. We're going to figure out which one's the best fit. Reach out and start giving you guys some more heavy content. We're on our way to becoming the greatest podcast in the history of MMA. So, as always, for TJ Craig, this is John Franklin. TJ, have a good week.
You too.
See you on the next one. Keep your hands up and your chin down. This is John Franklin, TJ Craig, Hot Cage Podcast.